For centuries, the popular image of the early medieval Scandinavian, the Viking, has been totally dominated by a single myth. We always picture these unkempt, bloodthirsty barbarians just caked in mud and gore, living in absolute squalor. But when we actually synthesize the evidence from material culture, from historical accounts, and from modern bioarchaeology, we find a massive historical contradiction. In this explainer, we're going to completely reconstruct the sensory and psychological reality of Viking Age hygiene. As you'll see, grooming wasn't just some modern luxury to them, it was the absolute foundation of their bodily order and their social survival.
Actually, let's just jump right in with this quote from an English monk named John of Wallingford. Look at his primary complaint here. He's not writing about their terrifying axes or their longships, right? He's complaining that the Vikings are dangerously overgroomed. He literally claims they're seducing local noblewomen by bathing weekly, changing their clothes, and combing their hair every single day.
Which, of course, begs a really fascinating question. Were the Vikings actually the cleanest people in Europe? Now, it's easy to fall into the trap of just saying yes and completely reversing the myth, but the reality is much more complex than that. We need to look at this through a multi-scale civilizational lens to understand exactly how the Norse understood cleanliness, how they literally used domestic waste to survive, and how they controlled their physical appearance in an incredibly harsh world.
Section 1. Laugardog, the weekly wash.
Let's start with their daily and weekly physical routines. We so often think of the past as just being inherently dirty, but this brilliantly illustrates their dedication. The Old Norse word for Saturday is laugardag, which literally translates to washing day or bath day. Think about that. They literally named the 7th day of the week after their mandatory hot bath and sauna routine. This wasn't some occasional luxury. It was a rigidly scheduled pillar of domestic life, and that word actually survives to this day in modern Scandinavian languages.
And when we look at the archaeological record, we find that grooming was so culturally significant, it left massive, undeniable physical traces. We discover a staggering volume of these artifacts in both male and female graves. Basically, every self-respecting free Norseman and woman carried a toilet case, often worn right on their belts next to their knives. We find finely crafted combs, which, by the way, are the single most common artifact discovered from the Viking Age. But we also find dedicated ear scoops for extracting wax, iron tweezers for plucking eyebrows and nose hair, and specialized nail cleaners. They actively managed every single aspect of their physical presentation.
Section 2. Chemistry of Norse cleanliness. Now, getting clean in the Viking Age wasn't as simple as just going to the store. They were literally manufacturing industrial soap. The process went like this. They'd filter hardwood birch ash through cloth, pour boiling water over it to extract a highly caustic liquid called lye, and then mix that dangerous alkaline lye with rendered animal fat or tallow. After boiling and stirring for hours until the water evaporated, they created this solid, incredibly powerful block of soap.
But here is the crucial point. This soap was incredibly harsh. It was highly alkaline, and if the mixture wasn't absolutely perfect, it could cause severe chemical burns. But they used it intentionally. They would leave it in their hair and beards for hours to chemically bleach them a saffron yellow or bright blonde. Blonde hair was a major cultural status symbol in early medieval Scandinavia, and this just proves they were willing to endure the physical pain of lye burns just to achieve their ideal visual identity.
And to really reconstruct the true sensory reality of this era, we have to talk about the acrid smell of stale urine. Yes, urine was a vital survival technology back then. Collected in communal vats, the urea naturally degraded into an ammonia solution. This mild alkaline agent was absolutely essential. It was used to wash heavy woolen garments, chemically emulsifying the sweat and lanolin trapped in the fibers so it could be rinsed away. They even boiled touchwood fungus in human urine to create a smoldering material that allowed them to transport live fire across oceans on their long ships. It's just a totally different way of living.
Section 3. A clash of civilizations.
So, when the Norse expanded out of Scandinavia, their intense habits shocked different cultures, but in completely opposite ways. As we just saw, the English Christians felt they were way too clean, like an actual threat to the local social order. But on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, the 10th century Arab Muslim diplomat Ahmad ibn Fadlan described the Vikings he met on the Volga River as the filthiest of God's creatures. So how could they both be observing the exact same people?
Well, the answer lies in how different civilizations defined cleanliness. You see, Ibn Fadlan observed the Vikings washing every morning, which you'd think he would appreciate. However, they washed from a single communal water basin. A slave would bring a bowl, and the chieftain would wash his face, comb his hair, blow his nose, and then spit into the water. And then that exact same bowl was passed to the next man who did the exact same thing. Ibn Fadlan, coming from a highly advanced Islamic civilization that valued flowing water and strict ritual ablutions, was utterly horrified by this shared basin. It's just a perfect historical contradiction.
Section 4. The bioarchaeology of pains.
Now, despite all their intense grooming habits, oral health was a massive, massive struggle. By looking at modern bioarchaeological studies, specifically a major analysis of skeletons from Varnhem, Sweden, we see that a staggering 49% of the adult Viking population suffered from painful cavities. This was primarily due to their diet. They ate a lot of starchy carbohydrates, coarse breads, barley porridge, peas, which easily impacted between the teeth and led to aggressive, painful decay.
But they didn't just sit back and let their teeth rot. Their skeletons actually show clear, chronic abrasion marks on the tooth roots from aggressive toothpick use. And here is the truly amazing part. The specific areas where they aggressively used toothpicks successfully prevented cavities. So they were actively practicing preventative oral care.
But when preventative care failed, things got brutal. I want you to bring yourself intimately close to the physical pain of the past for just a moment. To relieve the agonizing pressure and swelling from deep dental infections, Viking practitioners used fine tools to drill intentional holes from the crown of the tooth directly into the infected pulp chamber. This allowed the pressurized gas and pus to drain. They were essentially performing root canal therapies, surviving unimaginable pain without any anesthesia, just to prevent systemic sepsis and death.
And this brilliantly illustrates their incredibly complex relationship with pain. They didn't just suffer it. They wielded it for their visual identity. Over 130 male skeletons have been found with horizontal grooves skillfully filed directly into their front teeth. This deliberate mutilation was likely filled with black charcoal or animal fat to create a terrifying, high-status modification. Crucially, this modification was only visible when the man smiled broadly, or, more likely, grimaced in battle.
Section 5. Grooming as social survival.
Ultimately, all of this, the soap, the tooth drilling, the daily washing, it wasn't really about modern hygiene. It was deeply, deeply tied to Norse law, personal honor, and their entire spiritual worldview. Cleanliness was actually a legal right. According to the Icelandic Grágás law code, throwing dirt on someone or pushing them into mud or urine was not just some practical joke. It was a severe criminal assault on their personal dignity, and it was punishable by law. Being unkempt or soiled was a profound insult in honor-based Norse society, deeply associated with being a subservient thrall or slave.
Conversely, intentionally abandoning that hygiene was a profound psychological statement. Refusing to wash was the ultimate display of grief. It literally meant a suspension of the social order, and this is heavily tied directly to their mythology. When the beloved god Baldur was killed, his brother Vali famously refused to wash his hair or his hands until he had exacted bloody vengeance. We find this entire philosophy captured perfectly in the Havamal, the great collection of Old Norse wisdom poetry. It says, "Combed and washed every thoughtful man should be, and fed in the morning, for one cannot see where one will be in the evening." Grooming wasn't about vanity for them. It was a way to maintain personal order and dignity in a chaotic, violent universe driven entirely by fate.
Which leaves us with a totally transformed understanding of the human condition in the Viking Age. They weren't filthy barbarians. They were men and women fiercely maintaining their bodily order against the encroaching chaos of their world. So I'll leave you to think about this. If you lived in a world where you honestly didn't know if today was the day you would meet your fate, wouldn't you want to meet it washed, combed, and standing with absolute dignity?